Hey, this is Calvin. I am at the Aloe Yoga flagship store in Beverly Hills. Today's class is yoga basics, and we're basically just going to break down a couple of basic standing postures, whether you want to brush up on your standing poses or you're newer and just kind of want to start to understand what you're doing as you jump into a vinyasa flow practice. This is a great class for you. We'll do a couple different poses. We'll break them down slowly so you kind of feel comfortable in these poses. And don't forget to sign up for our YouTube channel. We have a ton of new content we pump out all the time. Let's get started. All right, guys, so for this class, we're going to go over some basic postures. If you don't have a block at home, maybe grab a book or even a stack of newspaper or a stack of magazines or something solid that you can use on your hands. If you're newer to yoga, I highly suggest, if you're doing practice at home, invest in a block. If you're at the studio, just make sure to grab one. Most studios have one. So go ahead and start out on your back once you are ready. And we're going to go over some basic postures today that you'll start to see in classes as you start to attend, or just to familiarize yourself if you practice online or what have you. So we're going to start with just a basic hip stretch, thread the needle. So cross the right ankle over the left knee. Try to cross at the ankle or slightly higher so that the ankle doesn't turn. It's a lot better for your foot. And then you're going to reach your right arm between the legs. You can grab the back of the hamstring, or some of you can grab the front of the shin. It's very tempting to kind of curl up in a little ball here in this stretch. Instead, keep your head and shoulders down and see if you can feel more like you're drawing the legs in towards your torso, your head, your shoulders, than lifting the head and shoulders to the legs. And you'll notice that it's a little more of a stretch in the outer hip. And go ahead and just start to breathe here. So I always like to emphasize that in the beginning of class, I tend to start on the back, and that's your opportunity to kind of establish your breathing patterns. So if you can start to breathe smooth on your back, it's a lot easier than trying to start to breathe smooth once you get into standing poses or once you're moving or in a more challenging position. So that said, just try to breathe smooth. If you can, breathe in and out of the nose. And let's go ahead and switch sides. So cross your left ankle over the right knee. Flex the heel. That keeps the muscles around the knee working, and the knee just a little bit safer. Left arm between the legs, right arm around, and we'll stretch the left hip. See if you can feel like the left hip almost moves away from your left armpit a little bit. The head and shoulders stay down again so the chest is wide. So you're not too much pulling on the lower back, but really addressing the outer hip. And then, slowly you draw the legs in. Now, while we're here stretching on our backs, if you're newer to yoga, you're going to hear about deeper breathing or ujjayi breathing, that sort of stuff. That's a deeper breath across the back of the throat where you breathe in and out of the nose. In the beginning, you can start to look for more tutorials with it, but essentially just feel like there's a contraction at the throat. And I like to explain it as basically it's like there was a mirror in front of your nose and you were trying to fog it up by breathing in and out of the nose. So it's a little bit of the sound at the back of the throat, and it works on the inhale and the exhale. And then go ahead and hug your knees into your chest and rock up to seated, extending your legs out. So you've gotten a little stretch in the outer hip now. And we're going to come into Janu Shirshasana. So just bend your right knee, take the bottom of your right foot to the inner left thigh, let the knee drop open, kind of taking advantage of that little outer hip stretch. Turn towards your left leg, and then start to fold forward. So just reach the chest forward, walk the hands out. Some of you that are a little more flexible can get the hands and hold on to the foot, or you can also use a strap around the foot. That helps. But for today, just walk the hands out a little bit and try not to round your back too much, but almost think like you're back bending, or think arch in the back slightly. And then as you're here, you flex this left heel, the toes point up, and just, again, take a couple breaths, establish your breathing pattern. And then we'll switch sides. So as you sit up, the right leg will go out. The left knee bends, bottom of the foot to the inner thigh, and then turn towards the straight leg. Lift your chest and just start to fold forward. So keep the hands not too far unless you're very flexible. And for most of us, as we get to yoga, we tend not to be too flexible. And that's one of the reasons that gets us there. So reach the chest away from the navel. Just basically think about lengthen the front body. So if you're rounding your back, the back of the body gets long, the front body shortens. If you're arching or back bending or whatever term you like to use, the front body lengthens here. And you'll notice that when you round your back here, you will feel it in the back of the leg, but most of us will also feel it in the lower back, and it tends to pull down on the sacrum or the low back. When you're longer in the front body, it really addresses the back of the leg better. And then we'll sit on up. So from here, I'm going to have you stand up. You're going to take your block with you, and you'll take your feet nice and wide. So you reach your arms out. You want to feel like your feet are more or less underneath your hands. And that's basically the stance we use for Prasarita Padottanasana. And we're just going to do a couple other little warm-up sort of things before we get into some standing poses. So just fold forward and walk your hands over to your right leg. And just take a couple breaths here. Try to press your left foot down just as much as your right. And then we're going to switch sides. So come back to the center, walk your hands over to your left leg. Take a few breaths here. And then come back to the center. Reach your chest forward, come up onto your fingertips, and see if you can feel like you're long in the torso, so you're not rounding your back, and maybe even have your hands on the block. Let your toes turn out a tiny bit, and then just bend your right knee. Keep the left leg straight, both heels down, and then we'll switch sides. So bend the left knee, straighten the right leg. Chest is moving forward. And we'll just do one more on each side. So bend that right knee. Maybe you even bend a little bit deeper than you did the first time. And then bend the left leg. Straighten the legs and stand up. So we want the feet a little bit closer for the next pose, and it's called triangle pose. So from here, you take the feet in a little bit, lift the front of your right foot up and turn the leg out. So it points straight to the back of the mat. Your back foot, turn it in a little bit, and you'll notice your right hip is able to draw in a little bit easier. So from here, most of us will use the block. I'm going to go for the highest setting for today. And as I do this, the right hip draws in as the ball of the right foot presses down. So this leg being nice and stable, those two actions work together to create that. And then you'll take the block down. If you're a little flexible, or a little more flexible, or maybe you have longer arms, maybe you need it on the lower setting, maybe your hand comes to the floor easily. Not too important. But reach the left leg into the floor. So really press the left foot down and try to send the right side body away from your right hip. And with that length, you want to turn your chest and reach the top arm up to the ceiling. So if my hand was on the floor here, you'd notice that I was rounding my torso a lot. So that's why we use the block. It basically lifts the floor up for the hand, and you're nice and long in the side body. That allows me to turn the chest. And as I'm here, if you're looking for a little extra length in the bottom side, see if you can feel like the left ribs pull in a little bit, and that'll send the right side body a little further from the hip as you reach the arms apart. We'll stay here a couple more breaths. So you want to feel like you're reaching through all four limbs, but as my feet press down, it's like my heels are drawing towards each other slightly, so the inner thighs actually feel like they're lifting towards the hips and the pelvis. And then grab a hold of that block and stand up. Turn the right foot in, turn the left leg out. So make sure it points forward. If the foot's pointed in, it puts the knee at risk. If the foot's pointing out, then it's harder to root through the inner foot, and it just throws off the leg. It's not as stable. It kind of tricks us into thinking our hips are more open than they are. That back foot turning in a little bit's important. It helps you firm the left hip, and then we lengthen the left side body, and the left hand will come down as the right arm reaches up. So again, we look for length in this left side body as the left hip draws back and the ball of the left foot presses down. This arm, try not to be too heavy. If you notice that your shoulder's up near your ear, try to lift higher through the right arm and be light enough in the left arm that if you wanted to, you could draw the shoulder away from the ear a little bit and feel like the left side of your neck had a little more space. And in a lot of our standing poses, what's in front of us, we tend to pay more attention to. So don't forget about this right leg. Press the back foot down, and that'll allow you to lengthen the torso. Because the torso is moving over that left leg, it's very easy to focus on the left leg and have it do all the work. Let's try not to do that. And then come on up to standing. So you'll turn the foot in, and you're going to take your feet a little bit wider. So our next pose is Warrior Two. If you practice in a flow class or in public classes, very rarely will you go through a class where you don't experience this pose. So you'll have your feet a little bit wider. Again, just maybe take your arms out. Feel like your feet are more or less underneath your hands. Doesn't need to be exact, but a nice wide stance. Turn your right leg out again so that it points straight to the back wall. Turn your back foot in a little bit. We're going to get into it a little different way than traditional, but just bear with me. So take your hands to your hips and bend your right knee so that you feel like it's more or less above your ankle. Try not to take it past the ankle, just above. The back foot's turning in, so that lets me draw the right hip in easier here. Now, it's kind of, for most of us, especially in the beginning, will feel like you're pushing your lower back forward. So what I want you to do is bend your left knee, the back knee, and then draw your belly in a little bit, and you'll feel the front of the hips and pelvis lift. So it's almost like you're a little more upright with your torso. It'll also let you sink a little deeper in the right leg. Turn your chest to face the side of the room, and then straighten your back leg. And from here, you reach the arms wide at shoulder height. As you reach the arms out, they kind of feels like the palms press down lightly, but the hands and arms reach apart. So it's very easy to kind of feel like the shoulders are holding the arms up, and then it gets really tedious. But the action of the arms is them moving apart, so the chest and the upper back are both wide. Traditionally, you'd look past your right hand. If you have neck issues and that just doesn't feel good, feel free to look to the side. And then we're going to come out of this side, take your hands to your hips, and turn your right foot in. From here, you'll lift the front of the left foot up, turn the leg out from the heel, and the back foot turns in. Your hands are on your hips to give your arms a little bit of a breather, and then bend into the left leg, so the knee's over the ankle. The hip draws back, and the heel presses down, not the toes of the left foot. With the hands on the hips, we want the hips to feel like they're even height from the floor, and you're going to bend the back knee as you draw the belly in just a little bit so your torso stands tall. Turn your chest towards the side, maybe bend a little deeper in the left leg, and then as the tailbone directs down, you straighten the back leg out a little or a lot. If you have low back issues, you can keep the back knee bent. It's not traditional, but it'll help you if you have low back issues. And then go ahead and reach the arms wide. So with the arms wide, the shoulders, they kind of relax a little bit. The belly pulls in a little, and you really work the arms apart. I like to use the term wingspan. You want to feel like you have a really broad wingspan as those arms reach apart. So if I'm reaching a little too far forward, my back will round, my upper back is wide. If I'm reaching back, I'll feel sensation across the chest, but the shoulder blades move towards each other. So take a glance at the hands, make sure one's reaching straight back, one's straight forward. And then for the last breath, just see if you can maybe bend a little deeper, and then stand on up. Lower the arms, give your arms a little bit of a breather. So again, just check in with the width of the legs. And we'll go back into the right side for another pose, what we call external poses because the legs turned out, called side angle. So, in side angle, same setup as Warrior Two. The bottom half of the body will be in the same position. So the right leg turns out, and the back foot turns in a little bit. And then what we're going to do is bend the right knee again, so the knee's over the ankle. If you need to bend the back leg to get a little taller, feel free to do so. Then we're going to take the right forearm on the thigh. So there's a couple different versions or variations of this pose, Parsvakonasana. We'll go over both of them. The basic starter version is forearm on the thigh. The top arm will reach up. So in Parsvakonasana side angle, typically the top arm reaches up and over. And it's very easy to turn from the wrist or elbow, but you want to turn from the top of the arm so the back of the shoulder widens. The idea is not to reach straight back, but to lift high enough that you can get a straight line from the back heel through the hand and have that length to turn your chest. So traditionally, the hand will be outside of the leg. So you could always take your hand on a block outside. Some of you with longer arms and that are more bendy can take the hand down to the floor outside of the leg. For today, we're staying forearm to the thigh. Try not to dump into the shoulder, lift up out of it. And then reach the top arm up And the second version of it would be bound warrior, where the arm goes behind the back. So again, you can stay with the forearm on the thigh, lifting the right shoulder away from the ear, drawing the shoulder away from the ear. And in the traditional versions of these, the hand would go inside to a block, the floor, or you could fully bind the pose, but for today we're staying forearm on the thigh. In this pose, draw the right hip back, lengthen the right side body in both versions, and use that length to turn the chest. And then we're going to come back up, warrior 2, straighten the leg, and turn the foot in. Lower the arms down, and pivot the left leg out. Turn the back foot in, and come back into warrior 2. Set it up so you're long in the torso. So the torso is going to tip, but we want the same length of the torso that we had in warrior 2. As you take the forearm to the thigh, the front hip draws back. The bend in the knee is nice and deep, so the knee's over the ankle. The weight sits down into the heel of the foot. So if you feel your left toe is gripping into the floor, try to press the heel down a little more. And don't forget the side of the body that we're not looking at. So really press that right foot down. Top arm reaches up. So just to exaggerate the rotation of the arm the way that we want it to, what we call external rotation, reach the arm forward. And notice you can turn your wrist, but it does nothing in the shoulder. So instead, turn your tricep down, and you'll notice the back of the shoulder widens. And as you do that, then reach the arm up and over, and you feel the width across the back of the shoulder, and that translates to space in the base of the neck. Naturally, most of us like to get heavy here in the forearm, so lift out of it. As the left hip firms and the left side body's long, turn your chest. And then you can be happy here, or take the hand to the outside of the leg, which is totally fine. And then we'll reach the arm up, we'll come back to the forearm on the thigh, and take the arm behind the back. Open the chest up towards the ceiling. If you notice that doing that kind of sticks the belly and front body out, draw the navel in. Keep the length of the left side body as you turn the chest, and then maybe you take the hand to the block inside of the leg. The arm and the leg, they press into each other as the left hip draws back. The right foot roots down firmly, and you use the length of the torso to turn your chest. And then come back up to warrior 2 and straighten the leg, lower your arms down. Now from here, we're going to come down onto your hands and knees. And from your hands and knees, that was a lot in the legs, especially if you're newer. So we're going to start with just a basic little stretch. We'll step the right foot forward, and we'll curl the back toes under as you take your hands to your right thigh. Just lift the chest up, let the hips sink down. Keep reaching through your left heel. A lot of people tend to do this pose on the top of the foot, and nothing wrong with it at all, but it is very easy to kind of sink into the low back and hips here. So for today, keep the back toes curled under so you're just a little bit taller in the lower back. And then we're going to switch sides. So come back to hands and knees. Step your left foot forward. Curl the back toes under. And as you reach that right heel back, bend the left knee, just lift your chest up. If you're feeling the lower back push forward a lot, draw your navel in a little bit. Try to stand nice and tall in the torso. And in a lot of these poses, if you feel like you're kind of lost in what the upper body's doing, I like to just take in the idea of good posture, you know. I think in yoga, we're trying to lengthen the spine, create good posture. So if you feel like this in a pose, very rarely is that right. Try to be a little more upright. That doesn't mean that you exaggerate it, but you should feel like your torso is pretty tall in most poses. And then come back to hands and knees. So the next pose that we're going to do is crescent lunge. We call it crescent here on the West Coast. On the East Coast, they tend to call it high lunge. So no right or wrong, it's just different strokes for different folks. But step the right foot forward and walk it to the right a little bit. So that'll help you to balance. Curl the back toes under and reach the heel back. So if my feet are kind of on a tightrope, the knee becomes unstable. It's harder to balance. There's too much going on. So the right foot walks to the right. Your feet are more or less hip width apart. Take your hands to your hips and lift your chest up. For a lot of us, having the back leg straight pushes the lower back forward. It's not particularly comfortable. So we're going to bend the back knee to start. And you'll notice as that happens, it becomes a little easier in the lower back. Draw the navel in a little bit. You'll feel a little more upright. And then reach the arms up to the ceiling. So the same way we emphasize the rotation of the arm in Parsvakonasana, same thing here. Or if holding the arms overhead is just really hard in the beginning, try hooking the thumbs and pulling them apart. But we want the triceps to wrap forward so the back of the shoulders are wide, and that helps us to lift the side body up and the back body. And as you're here, the right hip hugs in, and then maybe you can work to straighten the left leg out if it doesn't disturb the lower back too much. And I like the idea of basically feel like the upper body's lifting up and the lower body is lunging down. So the lower and upper body are moving in two directions as if you could create space in the midsection from that. And then take your hands down, step back to hands and knees, take a breather. So in general, a lot of our yoga practice is about creating space in the body. And a lot of the stretches you'll create, I think if you can take the idea of moving in two directions to create a stretch, it pays dividends in a lot of the work in most of your standing poses. So step your left foot forward, walk it to the left, curl the back toes under, reach the heel back. As you're here, hands come to the hips and lift your chest up. And then right away, just bend the back knee a little bit. Draw the navel in so you're nice and tall in the torso, and then the arms reach up. So you're lifting the upper body, lunging into the left leg, and maybe the right leg straightens, or maybe it doesn't. Either way is totally fine. And for this side, I'm going to hook the thumbs and pull them apart because it makes it a little easier to hold the arms up. But as I pull the thumbs apart, I reach the arms up and the triceps wrap. So I have all this space across the back of the shoulders. And then I lunge a little bit deeper, maybe straightening the right leg, maybe not. And then come on down. Set your hands and knees down. So that's a lot initially. We're going to do another pose, but I'm just going to talk for a minute and give you a little bit of breather. So as you get into your yoga practice, you're going to hear a lot about different stretches and different poses. And there's just an analogy that similar to what I was just saying about moving in two directions. And I like to use the analogy of a t-shirt. So if I wanted to stretch my t-shirt and I pulled in one direction, it wouldn't do that much. And if I were to pull in the other direction, not as much. But if I were to pull in two directions, I could create this stretch. So when you're focusing on your poses, especially initially, if you just focus on one part or one side, you're not going to create that stretch or that length that we kind of strive for in a lot of our yoga practice. So when I emphasize the back leg or what you're not looking at, try to think about that analogy for a little bit. In all of these poses, your entire body is active, and that's going to really help you to create space in the body. So we're going to do one more standing pose to kind of go over the basics, and I know it's a lot for today, but we're still doing it. So from hands and knees, you're going to step your right foot forward, and we're going to come back into crescent lunge with the arms up. And so all we're going to do is we're going to twist it. So take your hands together in front of your heart, lean out halfway. Get that left leg straight now. Because the torso is not upright, it doesn't put the lower back at risk to have the leg straight. Reach the leg back, almost from the midsection, so you feel the thigh bone lift up into the hamstring, and that's going to keep your left hip lifted. As your torso is nice and long, you'll turn to the right. And as you lengthen on your inhale, you maybe turn the chest a little more on the exhale, and take a few breaths. And you'll notice if you're stable with the legs and long with the torso, you turn the top of the torso. And then take your hands down. Come back to hands and knees. And so when I tell you to turn the top of the torso, there's another little analogy I'll use to kind of explain why before we do the second side. And essentially, if you look at the spine, we have the sacrum, all the stuff at the bottom, and I like to think of a palm tree. So the bottom of the spine is nice and wide, it gets taller. If you look at the way a palm tree sways in the wind, nothing happens at the bottom. And the mobility in our spine is very similar to that. So we want to be turning from the top of the torso, from the mid-thoracic up, where you have mobility to rotate, instead of just turning our hips. So if we can stabilize the hips, when I say keep the back leg strong, it keeps the back hip up, the hips are even height from the floor, you lengthen the torso, and then we turn where it's available. So let's come into the second side. And from here, step your left foot forward, walk it to the left so it's easier to balance. Reach the back leg back. Inhale, arms up, and then lean out halfway. So you'll feel as that right leg gets stronger, the hip lifts a little bit, the left hip hugs in. Right now, my hips are more or less even height from the floor. As this leg's strong, it's letting me reach my torso so I'm long, and then I'm turning to the left here, where I have mobility in the spine, where I can turn the shoulders and rotate and create space. But this is staying the same. I'm not just dropping the hip down to turn there. The turn is from the top half of the torso. And take a couple breaths here. And then take your hands down. Come down to hands and knees. And just have a seat on your butt. So we did a lot of external poses, which really strengthen the outer hips. We did a little bit of stretching in the beginning. And we're going to do a very basic stretch called Sukhasana, just to stretch the outer hips a little bit as we finish out. So Sukhasana is basically seated cross-legged. It's very easy, or most people will tend to cross the legs towards the ankle. We want to cross the legs in the center of the shin. So you want to feel like your feet are underneath your knees. And if you feel a little bit crowded, try scooting your hips back. Or if you feel like you're in a tighter frame and you have really tight hips, sit on a block and it'll make it a lot more accessible. From here, reach through the heels and you'll fold forward. I actually prefer not to be on a block, but I've been doing this one for a while. So you'll cross at the center of the shin, flex the heel, and stay nice and upright. If you have tighter hips, you'll feel it right away. If not, walk your hands forward. You can let the head hang and just slow your breathing. So breathe slowly, slow inhales, slow exhales. Reach through the heels. And it's just as important to stretch parts of the body as it is to strengthen and vice versa. They work hand in hand through your yoga practice. And then start to walk your hands back. And we'll switch the legs. And fold forward if you can. If not, just stay nice and upright. Let the head hang. And then start to come back up. Now from here, I'm going to have you extend your legs out towards the front of your mat. We'll take your feet about hip width apart. Let your feet drop open and slowly lie down onto your back. Once you get there, you can pick the hips up, kind of scoot them forward a little bit to feel a little longer in the low back. As the feet are open, let your palms open up to the ceiling. Close your eyes and just take a couple of smooth breaths. So breathe slow, not deep. You just try to kind of slow down. Slow inhales. Slow exhales. So you can stay here for as long as you would like. And if it were me, I'd stay there for at least 5 or 6 minutes. But for time's sake, I'm going to come up to seated. Stay there if you want. And once you're done, come on up to seated. Take a nice deep breath. Sigh it out. And go about your day. Thank you so much for tuning in.